All right, boys, it's game day. Let's go. Let's go. Big game. Got a big game today. My package has arrived. Oh, sweet. Nice. Score! Great win, fellas. What game's next? G-men are having a great year. Let's go blue! Here we go. Primetime football. Texans, Dolphins. Let's do this. Yes! Review. Yes! Yes!
Heartland Flags. Every sport, every team, every flag.
Every team?
That's right.
Fine. I'll get a Washington flag too.
Find your flag and so much more with fast, free shipping. Heartlandflags.com. Every sport, every team, every flag. Almost.
Loyal sons forever true. Go Cyclones.
Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Thank you for stopping in for episode 9 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. My name is Chad Leistikow. I write about the Iowa Hawkeyes for the Des Moines Register, and delighted, as always, to be coming to you live from the Channel Seed Studios. Iowa football continues to defy the odds, earning a 20-14 win against Purdue and covered the spread, despite a 6-for-21 passing day from Deacon Hill to improve to 5-1 for the season at the halfway point. And that leads us into the game of the year for the Hawkeyes, who, ready or not, have their Big Ten West division fate on the line this week at Wisconsin, 3 p.m. Saturday, Fox game. Jason Benetti on the call, Brock Heward, Hawkeyes 10-point underdog, Scott Dochterman, my friend from The Athletic, welcome. And let's get right into it with this question, my man. How much is at stake Saturday at Camp Randall Stadium?
I think this is the game of the year, especially for Iowa and mostly for Wisconsin as well. From what we've seen of this West Division, which is at its worst level since the old Bo Schembechler, Woody Hayes days, that whoever comes out of this is the survivor of the West. And I don't think either one of these teams are particularly good, even compared to what they were the last few years, a couple of years ago. But when you're looking at Purdue, they've not shown up. Northwestern, they got an interim coach. They're playing hard, but they're not good. Minnesota just gave up 1,000 points last week. We don't know about Nebraska. And Illinois is really falling on its face. I just don't know who could challenge either one of these two teams. And again, I'm not saying either one of these two teams are worthy of the final record they'll have. But for Iowa, I think they're more likely to stumble to somebody else than Wisconsin is. And so I think this is a paramount game if Iowa wants to get back to Indianapolis.
Yeah, and I think they do. We're going to get into it, whether everyone wants them to go to Indianapolis or not, and their fan base. But yeah, you lose this game. We talked about it on our Hawk Central show last night. Like, there's almost no path to the Big Ten West title because you got 2 in the L column. Wisconsin would still have 0. They'd be 3-0, and then they've got to lose 3 times, and you got to win out. And there's really no one else that can sneak in and make a multi-way tie, probably in this case. So this is it for the Hawkeyes to at least set a path to the Big Ten West Division title. And scoff at it all you want. Totally agree. This is probably the worst what the West Division has been, I think, since I've been covering the division. Yeah. Since I got back on the beat in late 2014, this is definitely the worst West we've seen, I would say.
Yeah,
so, but at the same time, I mean, this is what you play for, right? I mean, this game doesn't mean anything if Iowa doesn't find a way to beat Michigan State and Purdue the way it did in whatever fashion you want to call that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you look at you play for titles. You play for championships, and it doesn't matter that the West Division is at its worst level, and it is. There's no question. I mean, this is the 10th and final year, and it is
It's going out with a bang.
Yeah, it's going out with like a back
or a thud.
like, blow up in your hand type of. But still, it's still the same way. I mean, it's kind of like in the NFL, Chad. I mean, we've seen good NFC North teams seasons where it's like, wow, you're 12-4, 12-5, and you're not going to win the division. Then we've seen years where 8 wins might get it done. That doesn't, you still win the division. You still host a playoff game, just like in this case, you still win the division. You still go to Indianapolis. Doesn't mean you're going to win the Super Bowl or go to the college football playoff, but it's an accomplishment, and that's what you play for. And you play for traveling trophies, and you play for rivalry games, and you play to beat Wisconsin. Iowa. That has been the model program. They're in your neighborhood. They've been the bully on the block. You're going to Camp Randall Stadium where you haven't won since 2015. You go to beat them. And therefore, that's the challenge this week. More than the West Division title, which we look at, their challenge is go fight their big rival. And that's what we're going to see on Saturday.
Yeah, tons to play for. Legends and Listeners is always brought to you every Thursday by Heartland Flags and Gifts. And we thank them for their title sponsor support. And they sent us Bears flags this week, Scott. I got mine right here. Yeah. I didn't want to unfurl it yet. I'm kind of waiting for the right moment. But thank you to them. And I think it was just to celebrate that Chicago won its first game in 347 days.
Yeah.
A lot to celebrate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dick Butkus, God rest his soul, the greatest Bear of them all. And, we can talk about Walter Payton or Dick Butkus. They're both in that category. Just the epitome of what Bear football always was and always should be. Physical, tough, hard-nosed, aggressive, ultimate Bear in my eyes. And, God rest his soul last Thursday. And he squeezed one out, got one for the Bears that night. So against the Washington whatevers. So,
yeah, right. Well, sorry, folks. We exceeded our 30-second allotment of Chicago Bears talk on the Iowa Everywhere pod here. But I do want to remind folks that Heartland Flag and Gifts offers free shipping anywhere in the U.S., always has fresh products, nearly every team, every sport, and every flag. Visit our good friends online at heartlandflags.com or in-store at 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. Let's continue speaking about, ugly football sometimes. Let's dig into the history of Iowa, Wisconsin. I wrote about this a little bit, but I kind of wanted to get your take on it too. Somebody asked me, is this the biggest Iowa-Wisconsin game of the Kirk Ferentz era? And obviously, we can talk about some ones that had higher stakes. But the point of the question, Scott, was we talked about this a few weeks ago, right? If Iowa goes in there with the stale, old Brian Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz offense and gets blown out or beaten handily by the Luke Fickell, Phil Longo, new look, Badgers, air raid, they're changing. Iowa's not. Is that a significant fulcrum, I guess, for this Iowa-Wisconsin series and kind of reinforce the fact that Iowa's falling behind the times, Wisconsin progressing with the times as we head into the 18-team Big Ten? Or does Iowa win and kind of validate the consistency, the do it the same way, stick to your principles, fundamentals? I think that's the tone of the question. We can get into some other historical games between these two teams, which are fantastic, frankly, in the Kirk Ferentz and even Barry Alvarez era. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about that kind of question in terms of how significant this matchup is for the trajectories of this series and this program?
I think it's really significant for the trajectories. I think we could rattle off multiple games that may have mattered more or as the same in the past. But I think when you look at the two teams and where they're headed next year, and the fact that it's going to be a divisionless structure, the fact that 4 teams, including 3, I think that are the top 3 in the country or were top 3 in the country in total offense, are joining the Big Ten in Washington, Oregon, USC, plus UCLA, which is in top 30 at least. And you look at Wisconsin as making changes to its offense, and it could backfire spectacularly in the big picture, or it could elevate them to be more competitive in the new era, then I think it does matter. And you look at Iowa and it's a stale offense that hasn't changed at all. And then the setbacks of losing your best player in Luke Lachey and losing your quarterback in Cade McNamara. I think, this is significant, because if it's a blowout for Wisconsin, does that reinforce and crystallize in Kirk Ferentz's mind how far they need to go? Or can victory be the enemy of progress for Iowa, which is if they win 13-10 in Madison, does it automatically say, see, we told you, just stick to what we're doing here? And then therefore it's very challenging for them to make changes. And then next year you get your comeuppance against those teams. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't know. I mean, I would hope that they evolve anyway, but hope isn't a strategy on our end.
Good perspective there. To answer that question, I certainly pointed to 2010 being the class. You've written about it in The Athletic, Scott. Just the number of NFL players on that field. You talked about it last week, the Brett Greenwood pick, right? The intensity of that environment and how much that 31-30 Wisconsin game meant. Somebody tweeted the fake punt video this week, and it's just like it stirs up all those memories. And then 2004, the Big Ten on the line in Kinnick Stadium, both teams 6-1 in league play. I don't know what the spread was in that game, but I'm guessing it was probably pretty tight. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wisconsin might have even been favored a little bit. They were. And Iowa comes out and wins it 30-7. With classic Ferentz ball, turnovers, seizing on short fields, and you're celebrating a Big Ten regular season championship, a shared championship with Michigan, the last one this program has experienced. I don't think it gets any bigger than that in the Ferentz era, but the perspective is significant. It's not like in the West of it, the West or Legends and Leaders eras. Like, it's not like there's been like, this Iowa-Wisconsin game is going to decide the West. It does often decide the West, but it hasn't been almost as like obvious as this, where it is going to decide the West. There's almost no way another team's going to win the West this year.
Right.
Hate to harp on that, but.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would look at a couple of things. I think 15 had similar vibes to some extent, but it was such an early game.
It was early.
It was like earlier than this one. And so,
week 5. Yep.
Yeah.
It was Iowa's Big Ten opener, right? Because they had just beaten Pitt, and then
it was like North Texas. It was like they crushed them, and they went up there, and it was the bully on the block again. They'd won several in a row with Iowa, and it's 10-6, and there are very few individual plays that were bigger than Nate Meyer's forced fumble that Faith Akaki recovered on the goal line, and they won 10-6 because that propelled them to an undefeated season, a West Division title, and it was significant. I think in 19 was sneaky important, because had Iowa won that game, it would have went to Indianapolis. Yeah. And it was 24-22, and Nate Stanley's collision at the 1-inch line and prevented a 2-point conversion, and it was 24-22. The last few years have been more blowouts. But, overall, this is a great series. And it's it's weird, Chad, because if you were to tell me, who's Iowa's most important rival or biggest rival, it's hard to really say. It's not defined, but this series always matters because there are two teams that have similar principles, and the outcome often determines who's going to win the division or who's going to have a great year, even in the divisionless structure.
Well, Scott, the latest check of the forecast for Saturday shows about a 70% chance of rain in Madison, 15 to 25 mile an hour winds. The spread is Iowa plus 10. The over under is a paltry 34.5 points. Wow. So if you feel strongly either way, hit up Circa Sports, which is the exclusive sports betting app of Iowa Everywhere. Circa Sports is sports betting the way it should be, with the highest limits, lowest hold, best odds. Download the app today at the App Store or circusports.com. Scott, I'll ask you this one question, then we're going to get to our main topic. Does the weather forecast help Iowa? And we know it didn't help at Penn State, or at least it didn't. Maybe it didn't matter at Penn State when Iowa lost 31-0. But does this neutralize things for Iowa, or does that paralyze the Hawkeyes? What do you think?
I don't think it helps them. I know people think that sometimes, like, oh, this will slow them down. They'll down the other team. It'll slow you down too. And when you have a quarterback who hasn't really played very much, does the ball make it more slippery for him? And he hasn't been very accurate. So does it throw to the other team a little more often than what Tanner Mordecai can do there? So I don't know. I don't like that for Iowa necessarily until it can really show it can run with consistency. And even then, slippery balls, so I think, I don't know. How do you feel, Chad? Do you think it helps them? I mean, are you contrary on me on this? I
think they got to get to an early lead if it's going to help. You can't get behind, and which is what happened against Penn State. Even 3-0 and 10-0 felt like a giant mountain to climb, or a Mount Nittany to climb. So I think it helps if the Iowa can get the early lead. As always, I figure Iowa will have the ball first, and usually Brian Ferentz's script is decent. It's when he gets off script that there are troubles, and I'm sure we'll get into that maybe. Yeah, but so I kind of feel like it just kind of depends on if Iowa can get that lead, because if they're playing from behind, I hate Iowa's chances on Saturday. I don't think they're going to come back like they did against Michigan State. I don't think Wisconsin will let them in that environment, but if you can take the crowd out of the game with the weather, get up 7-0, even 10-0, let the weather take over, let your defense take over. They are running the air raid. I don't think they're going to run every down. You articulated that in the Athletic. I mean, they're running 87% 3 receiver sets or 4 receiver sets. So anyway, we'll see.
The one problem is, though, Chad, that they are number one in the Big Ten in both rushing yards per game and rushing yards per carry.
There's touchdowns.
There's still Wisconsin. Now they haven't played a defense like Iowa's, but when they have Braylon Allen and they have that, I mean, they could lean into that and make life difficult for Iowa, especially if there are a lot of 3-and-outs, which is usually the case against Wisconsin.
I don't think there's any avoiding 3-and-out. We're going to see Iowa go 3-and-out a few times, at least on Saturday. But, Wisconsin's minimum, they've scored at least 22 in every game. Their offense hasn't been like a juggernaut or anything like that, but, Iowa would kill for 22 points most Saturdays, let alone 25.
Yeah, so, right.
Anyway, all right, we got to move on to our main topic today, which, Scott, is a big one. I mean, it is a big game. But there's also some other, there's just chatter. There's chatter every week with this team. So the main topic we decided on today was, how does Iowa win this game? And do Hawkeye fans want them to win? We touched on that a little bit earlier in the show. Obviously, we're not going to tell you guys how to feel, whatever. That's not our job. But we both have seen a lot of sentiment out there, Scott, that there's a segment of the fan base that is not even happy that they're winning, or at least is voicing that they aren't. I mean, I assume they're still watching the games because they're griping about them. But I don't know. I wrote a column. Let's frame it this way. You take it wherever you want. Okay. I wrote a column that posted this morning that has generated some conversation. And I wrote about Iowa being 23-10 over the past 2.5 seasons, despite allowing 297 more snaps to the other team, 1,052 more yards to the other team. And like one of the very first replies I got was something to the effect of, I don't care about 23-10. Iowa football isn't fun to watch anymore. I get it. I do. But Iowa's finding ways to win. And the column was more about how they're finding ways to win. How do they do this? It defies logic that they can win. I should have done the math. I guess it's close to 70% win percentage with no offense. They literally have no offense. They're the worst in the country, or next to worst. I don't know. Where do you stand on this whole deal?
I think they're as resilient and self-aware as any program in the country. I've said before, and I maintain that Kirk Ferentz is probably the best that I've ever seen when it comes to adverse situations. He rallies the team. They stay the course. They find ways to win, even if it doesn't look like there's any path to victory. We've seen it time and time again. And, 2016 getting bum rushed at Penn State and then coming back and beating Michigan. 2020, the situation in the offseason, then to start 0-2 and then to put up an impressive 6-game stretch where their average margin of victory was almost 22 points a game. Now they can't even average 22 points a game. So they've learned how to win despite their limitations. And that should be applauded in the big picture, in the context that, wow, how does this team do it? How do they win 13-10 at Minnesota last year? Well, they have resilient, tough dudes, Jack Campbell being as important as anybody to push them through to that final conclusion. However, I completely understand the sentiment of the fan base that has grown frustrated with this style of play. When you know what your problem is and nothing changes, and football is entertainment, just like basketball and just like any other sport. And people want to be entertained. And this is not an entertaining style of play. And it's an offensive sport. People want to see points. They want to see yards. They want to see touchdowns. And when that phase seems unimportant and you don't change why it doesn't work, and it almost seems like it's your fault for complaining about it, then I completely understand why people are frustrated with it. However, what comes down to the crux of your discussion, and I agree with you on this, is at some point, if you're a fan, don't you got to be happy that they're winning? Instead, I think that there's a cynical wing of this, and it's grown louder and louder, that almost would prefer losses. So that guarantees changes rather than victory. And that's a scary position for the whole entire operation. Fans, media, players, coaches, Iowa athletics. So it's a weird vortex that they've entered, and it's almost scary.
It is weird. I also would say be careful what you wish for, just because where I live, there's a program about 2.5 hours west that hasn't shown it can win close games for years and years and years and years. They crumble in the fourth quarter. I think where the point of my column was, and I'm not celebrating the offense in any way, shape, or form, but I'm pretty impressed with the resiliency that I see in like a Logan Lee, a Cooper DeJean, heck, Jay Higgins talked about it. You just talk about, Eric All talked about it yesterday, and he's new, but it's everybody buys in. Cooper DeJean said something to the effect of, "We believe we prepare better than anyone else in the country," and of course they're going to say that. They prepare better than us. They're not going to say that, but he made a good comment. Like, we want to see that play out over 60 minutes. We believe that that's going to win out over the course of 60 minutes. It may not look like you want it to look, but I continue to be amazed at how Iowa closes these games out somehow. I mean, they gave the ball to Iowa State, Michigan State, and Purdue with a chance to go down and drive for the tying or winning touchdown. I mean, Purdue had a chance to drive for the winning touchdown the other day because the offense couldn't get a first down and refused to sneak on 3rd and 1, which was silly, by the way.
Yeah.
Run the sneak.
Yeah.
Run the deep sneak on 3rd and 1.
There you go.
But they find a way. First play, Logan Lee gets a sack. Iowa State, 4th and 1. Ethan Herkett comes backside and makes a tackle to squelch that drive. I mean, heck, the Minnesota game last year, great example. Like, where did that win come from?
Yeah.
Minnesota, moving up and down the field. Iowa creates 2 fourth-quarter turnovers, turns that into the game-winning field goal. It's pretty remarkable how they do it. And I know you mentioned Jack Campbell, right? I mean, I feel like since he's been a driving force in the program, that's been part of it too. Like, they just are so resilient in the way they practice and the way that they compete on Saturdays. that I think it's easy to overlook that because that's a killer instinct that's really not easy. These are not easy games to win. Like they say, those guys are on scholarship too, right?
Right.
And that's why I wrote about it. It's like, I can't believe that they found ways to win 23 out of these 33 games with such limitations on offense. So I just appreciate it, I guess.
Yeah. And I wish more people would, because when you look at the resiliency, the toughness on defense, the way that they're forcing the action and forcing turnovers. You look at last year at Illinois, for instance, and they didn't win that game, but how close they came, a fraction of an inch of an elbow from Riley Moss taking a fumble 82 yards for a touchdown and forcing a fumble at the 5-yard line. And then, of course, the offense and all the issues there on that. But overall, they're finding ways to compete. They're scrapping. They're everything, every intangible that you want in a program. And the toughness, the mental toughness, the physical toughness, the ability to bounce back after tough defeats. I mean, when they were 3-4 last year, Chad, and they lost at Ohio State, and that was the most putrid offensive display across the board, just with the turnovers and they didn't just unravel the way every other program would have. They would, a lot of teams, especially with those problems, would have been 4-8, 3-9, maybe 5-7. No, they were within a game, a touchdown from going back to Indianapolis. And you look at the same thing this year with these games, and the defense isn't quite as good as last year's, and I'd argue that very few are. That was the best defense of the Ferrets era last year. So I mean, as good as it gets, all the way back to 81, and there are some strange parallels with 81 and that offense that people have forgotten about, and that offense is every bit the equal to this one. It was really, really, really bad, even with Bill Snyder and Kirk Ferentz and Hayden Fry, calling plays. It was not a pretty offense back in 81. But I think with this team, you can admire the fight and admire the tenacity and the approach and the willingness to do whatever it takes to win games. And you can put that in one corner, but then you can also be aggravated by the limitations and say,
absolutely, yeah,
why can't you just do this or even try this, let alone do it? But to your point with Jack Campbell, we talked a little bit about this earlier this morning. I would say CJ Beathard and Jack Campbell are the two most influential figures in Iowa football the last 10 years. And CJ Beathard, for obvious reasons, we saw it offensively in 15, that he changed the game. He was a difference maker. He tipped the field. And Jack Campbell, not only by his performance, which was elite to the nth degree, but by how he practiced and how he performed and how he would refuse to allow players to think differently or get down on themselves or slack off. And, last year, his shirt, 2 years ago too, when they went to the championship game, but last year his sheer will pushed Iowa in that category. And then this year, the players like Joe Evans and them that have remember how Jack was and have played that way. I'm thoroughly impressed with how resilient this operation has been.
Yeah. Little history lesson as you were talking there, 2004 season celebrated in Iowa history. Yeah. That team averaged 2 yards a carry. Two. And they won 3 games by 2 points. One of them was 6-4. Everyone remembers that. But there was a couple other games that were pretty ugly in there. They won by 2. 2009, they averaged 3.27 yards per carry. That was, for the most part, an ugly-looking offense. There were some games. They had more explosiveness, no question. I'm not comparing these offenses. But that team had a lot of warts too. But we remember these teams because ultimately they won games. 2004, you win on the Tate to Holloway thing. That's what everyone remembers. But you don't remember the ugliness on offense for much of that year. 2009 was not pretty. I mean, gosh, 24-21 over Arkansas State, 17-16 over UNI. Certainly, that team won at Happy Valley. This one did. I'm not comparing these. I'm not saying this one's anywhere closer, but I'm saying let's see how this plays out. And that's why Saturday is such a big game. What I push back on a little bit, Scott, is, for example, yesterday we had George Barnett on the Zoom, and I tweeted out some comments he was making. It was a good conversation. You want to hear from the O-line coach. You want to hear, somebody asked about how the freshmen were looking. I think Tom might have.
Yeah.
And, he made the comment about how, someone was telling him, who's been here longer than he has. Another part that some people out there are missing, like that this might be the best scout team offensive line they've seen in the Ferentz era, something like that. And that got railed on. And it's like, so you're going to take a dump on Twitter on 4 true freshmen, potentially, and other probably walk-ons in there, whatever. Guys fighting to make the team that are having really good, developmental years. And you're going to blast the offensive line coach for sharing that information that they might be hits. And I mean, the quote tweets, the replies are just insane. I almost don't want people to go look at them because it's almost embarrassing. And I feel for, do you guys not want the information that the coaches are giving you or not? Or do you want us to not ask about, do you want us not to just, you don't want us to just keep it to ourselves? It's just the reflex to just be negative about everything drives me crazy because it's not all negative. It's not all positive. Neither Scott or I we're probably the most vocal offensive critics there are out here. I mean, nothing, we know it doesn't look good, but you can't ignore the good parts that are going on as well. And that's kind of my point. I just want people to kind of like evaluate where they're coming from with some of these comments. And if you just hate everything, then I guess that's who you are.
Yeah, and that's the worst part of, I think, the kind of deterioration, I should say, of the offense the last few years has left people from being aggravated to skeptical to cynical. And now everybody is a cynic and everybody thinks they're funny and everybody is coming after, innocuous comments or, the offensive line coach is happy with the development of the true freshman on the scout team and he thinks they're playing well. Good. You should be happy about that if you're an Iowa fan. Okay, well they're not ready to play right now. That would be insane. That's what they tried to do last year with guys like Bo Stevens, and it just didn't work out. So why is that a moment to go on the attack on Iowa and make fun of everything Iowa related? If you're an Iowa fan, it just doesn't make sense. Doesn't compute to me, and I'm there with you. I mean, I've tapered off on Twitter a little bit because I start to get really smart assy, and then I'm like,
I like your smart assery on Twitter. I'm here for it. I'll hit the like button.
After a while, I'm like, I probably shouldn't do that, and my wife gets on me all the time for it. It's like, all right, and so but like in the game last week, I'm like, I'm just going to tweet some information and I'm not going to really engage. I'm not going to do anything because it just doesn't benefit anybody. So I know that's the way people's knee-jerk opinions and reactions are these days, but again, your team is 5-1 and your team is going has an opportunity to have a really good season. They're not playing a lot of great teams. There's no question about that, but they're winning their games. And yet here we are constantly. And then it puts us in a position that I don't feel comfortable in, Chad, to be honest with you, and probably you either, defending this program. I don't want to defend anybody. I want to provide rational analysis that either looks at this program objectively and says,
yes.
Here are the positives, here are the negatives, here
exactly
are the warts,
what we do.
And instead, when I'm like, when everybody's all down on Brian Ferentz, I'm like, you know what? His first quarterback threw 68 touchdown passes in 3 years. 2 of his teams are 2 of the highest scoring teams in team history. Then all of a sudden I'm a Brian defender, and then Bray Gunn comes out with a shirt that I'm not related to Brian Ferentz. So it's like, I'm not trying to, so I totally feel you, man. And I saw all the comments, and I'm like, I'm staying out of this one. I listened, I asked questions. I'm not even going to tweet it because it just doesn't seem like it's going anywhere in a positive way.
Well, let's get into, we're running out of time here. We got about 10 minutes left. Kind of a blueprint to victory. How do you think? What is the path for Iowa to win? I think it comes down to you're going to have to be successful on the ground. I think we saw that Iowa can be successful on the ground last week against Purdue. You're not going to get the big plays against Wisconsin. They're too disciplined to let you get the big plays. So I think the only path Iowa has is second down success, get to third and short. Third down conversions are terrible right now. You've got to get to third and short. You're not going to convert third and tens with Deacon Hill. I'm sorry to say. You might get one. Like you did. I think he might have, he got a couple against Michigan State, I think. But that's not a recipe to beat Wisconsin. We saw that in 2017 when they gained 66 yards. I think you just got to stay committed to the run and hope that connects. I like what Caleb Johnson and LeSean Williams give them as a 1-2 punch. I think that's your best bet. I thought Bo Stevens looked good in his limited snaps. I'd like to see more of him out there. It's good news that Connor Colby and Mason Richmond are improving in health. And I feel like Jennings Dunker has played pretty well. I mean, he's better than the 2 years of right tackle we've seen in 21 and 22. Yeah. And Logan Jones has improved. So I think that's your best path to victory with this quarterback. What do you think?
It's always about the running games when you talk about Iowa, Wisconsin. Since Ferentz joined the league as head coach, only twice has the winner been the team that's rushed for the fewest yards. And that was by 1 yard once and like 5 yards the other time. So it's about line of scrimmage play. It always is. Now, there are the factors that you can't predict that are turnovers. And I think it works both ways. I mean, whether it's Deacon Hill throwing 3 interceptions, which is very possible, or Iowa intercepting and bringing a couple of back, which is always possible too. But if you remove that from this equation and you look at path to victory, if all things are even, then I think it's about running the football and grinding out first downs. And that's not always about scoring points. I know that's a sin that I mentioned here, and may God rest my soul. But if you get the ball at the 25, if you can get the ball to midfield, then that's a winning possession, against Wisconsin and for Iowa, because then you can punt and generally pin them back. And then you're playing field position football where Iowa's more comfortable. And then you take over near midfield, and then you establish yourself line of scrimmage wise. So I think that's going to have to be that. They're going to have to generate at least 3 scoring drives. You'd hope that it's not 3 field goal drives, but they're going to have to generate some offense. And then, defensively, they're going to have to slow down the run. I mean, this team still averages 200 yards a game on the ground, and they're really good on third down. Iowa is worse than everybody put together. So it's they have to stay out of third down situations. They have to win on first down.
Scott, I've got Iowa losing 17-10. I do have them covering. I don't feel great about it, but I think it's possible that this turns ugly too. I'm not discounting that. Iowa is 10-2 in its last 12 games. So just do want to remind people of that before you totally discourage the shot of victory here. But I do want to flip this for our final thought here, Scott, before we go. Let's say Iowa wins. However it happens. Could be 10-6, like in 2015. It could be, like Josh Jackson getting 2 picks in 17, except the defense, except the offense does a little bit, and Iowa wins 17-14 with 2 defensive touchdowns, something like that. Let's say Iowa wins. How does that change the tone of the rest of this season? Because all of a sudden then, are people on the bandwagon at that point, or are people still bashing the Hawks?
I think that the cynics will be cut in half. There will be continued cynics. that this team sucks. It's a shame. This team's going to go to Indianapolis and get murdered and all of that stuff. And you're never going to change those people, because that's, they're the same people who complain on Christmas morning because they didn't get exactly what they wanted, or they complain because they got exactly what they wanted. I think in this case, though, when you look at if they do win, I think the fans who are pretty loyal will start to chirp a little bit and say, you know what, let's take some pride in this. Let's be happy. Our team is winning. Our team is 6-1 and 11-2 over the last 13 games. And yes, they're not beautiful, but man, they're playing hard, and they're playing for us and all of that sort of thing. I think you'll see all that, and I think some of the cynics will taper it back a little bit. They're not going to be thrilled with the offense, but not many people are. But I do expect them, if that happens. Now, I'm not predicting it to happen. I think I picked Iowa to lose 16-6.
We're in the same ballpark.
Yeah,
I guess we got the under, huh?
Yeah. Always pick the under on Iowa, but if I can see a path to victory, sure, and if they do win, then it does amp up the Floyd talk next week, and they're going to have to be careful there. And then they get a week off, and I'm going to try to say the same thing, the same message that I had way back when in 2015, which is enjoy this, embrace this. It doesn't happen very often, and it's probably not going to happen very often now that they're in a singular division starting next year with 4 high-powered new offenses coming in. So try to enjoy it. And football season is a gift. It is. I love it. And it's already halfway over. And afterwards, you're going to be thinking about next year, and I can't believe it's over, and blah, blah, blah. Please enjoy it while it's here. Even the losses. It's a joy. It's a gift from God. It's football season.
One more thing to talk about here, Scott. It's the crossover at Kinnick on Sunday, 2 p.m. At this point, I think both of us will be there. That's the plan anyway, coming back from Madison on late Saturday night or early Sunday, depending. What a spectacle. I think 50,000-ish expected, right? The forecast looks not great, but I think it's going to be doable. It looks like, temps in the 50s, maybe some wind. Might have to, I'm not sure how many threes Caitlin Clark's going to be able to rein in, but if she can knock in like 7 to 10 with 20 miles an hour winds, that'd be pretty special. But anyway, I don't know. Just kind of fun, huh? Any thoughts you have on the crossover at Kinnick before we let the folks go?
I'm excited for it because this really elevates women's basketball, which has been fun to watch for a long, long time with Lisa Bluter and Jan Jensen and everyone. But you're for the most part filling up Kinnick Stadium for women's basketball, and you're going to have, they're thrilled because they're going to get a kid captain. They're going to be able to do the wave. I did ask Caitlin in Minneapolis this week. I said, are you going to come out to Back in Black? She goes, Scott, some things we just need to keep a secret around here. I thought that was kind of funny, but let's have a fun event. There's no winner or loser attached, and it's a celebration and a kind of an entrance for a program that has really taken such hold of the fan base in a positive way. And I hope people don't lose sight of that. Now that every ticket is sold for the upcoming season, my fear is that we get cynical Iowa football and men's basketball fan deciding to chime in on women's basketball. Because the fans have been very, very positive over the years in women's basketball. And I don't want them, I thought this team was supposed to go to the Final Four, because they lose at Maryland or someplace like that. Well, go kick the dog. I'm sure the dog won't bite you. Anyway. I'm excited for the event. I think it'll be terrific for everyone involved and everyone in the stands.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be kind of a celebration, honestly, a continuation, almost like it celebrates what you accomplished last year in a way, because it's like, it's times 6 or whatever of what was at the Pentecrest, after the national championship and back in April, national championship game run. You know what I mean? I know they didn't win the title, everyone.
Yeah.
But just kind of celebrate that, but then start a new chapter, because this is a totally different team. I agree. It's going to be really hard to repeat what happened last year, but certainly will be a lot of fun. And I mean, if people can't enjoy what could be the last season of number 22 playing for the Hawkeyes, then she's not going to be around forever. So try to enjoy it. Try to enjoy it. And it'll be fun on Saturday. I can't wait to see all the faces in the crowd and, cheering for every basket. The women's fans are tremendous.
Yeah, they are. They always have been. They've always been very committed and always very positive. I've always enjoyed that even when they lose or if they don't go to the Final Four, that, it's not they don't tear down the program, they elevate it. And I think I really enjoy that type of philosophy. And one thing I'll add about Caitlin Clark is she's the most transcendent elite level athlete that we've seen at the University of Iowa in our lifetime. I mean, the only one to me that's on the same scale as her is Niall Kinnick. And that came way before our births. So, and we're old dudes. Yeah. So I think that enjoy her while she's here, because she's a gift that we haven't ever seen before. I'm using that term a lot. I apologize, but no, she's fantastic. And you have to appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll put up my coffee mug. There you go, folks. There's the message today. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, fans, for supporting Legends and Listeners. We really appreciate all the positive feedback you guys have given us on social media. I know we're still, in our first 10 episodes here, but it's been super uplifting. How about that? Social media praise and positivity, Scott. Yeah. We hope that we're able to bring some real Hawkeye talk, critical talk, but also some rational talk to your feeds every Thursday. And Scott, I'll see you in Madison in a couple of days.
Look forward to it, Chad. Always.
Yeah, and we'll enjoy that walk to the press box. That's media problems. Anyway, all right, for Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Next week, another trophy, a bronze pig on the line. We'll talk about that with you next Thursday at 11 a.m. from the Channel Seed Studios here on Legends and Listeners on the Iowa Everywhere Network.